8.7 issue, how should slaves be counted? The Great Compromise kept the framers working together, but having agreed to base representation in one house of Congress on state population, they faced a new and difficult question. As Gouverneur Morris of Pennsylvania put it, upon what principle shall the slaves be computed in the representation? In other words, should the slaves be counted as people? And if they are counted as people, then that would increase the number of people that they would have represented in Congress. So people or property, like everyone else, Southerners naturally wanted as many representatives in the House as possible. To them, the answer was clear. Slaves should be counted the same as any other people in determining representation. To Northerners, however, the answer was not so clear. Were slaves to be considered people with the right to be represented in Congress, or were they property? Blacks are property and are used to the southward as horses and cattle to the northward, argued Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts. Most Northern delegates agreed. Slaves should be counted, all right, but as property that could be taxed like any other property. If slaves were to be counted as people in determining representation in Congress, said Morris, then make them citizens and let them vote. New thinking on slavery. This argument signaled an important change in white Americans' thinking about slavery. During the colonial period, most whites had simply accepted slavery as part of the human condition. As you read in Chapter 7, the Declaration of Independence and the Revolutionary War forced many whites to re-examine their views on slavery. As they did so, more and more came to the conclusion that slavery was wrong. After the war, anti-slavery groups were organized in many states. In the North, this new thinking led one state after another to pass laws ending slavery. Although many Southerners were uneasy about slavery, they were not yet ready to abolish it. The South's economy was still too dependent on the labor of enslaved African Americans. But some Southern states did pass laws making it easier for owners to free their slaves. The question facing the farmers was how far they could take this new thinking in a nation that was becoming half slave and half free. Let's take a look at some of the questions really quick here. How should slaves be counted or for representation numbers? So I find it kind of interesting in the South, they're like, yes, we want them to be represented so that we could have as many representatives as possible. And this should say taxed. So owners should not be taxed on their slaves. And in the North, they were like, well, are they people with rights or property? More and more people are starting to think that slavery is wrong. And Northern states pretty much outlawed slavery. And they said they should not be counted. Owners should be taxed on their slaves just like other property they owned. Why was it so difficult to end slavery for the South? Because their economy or the way they made money was too dependent on it. So let's take a look at this graph really quick. Let's see if I can move it over. There we go. So population counts for Southern states, 1790. So the population not counting slaves, you can see was a lot less. If they included the slaves, then it would be a lot more for them. So the representation would be higher if they included the slaves. So again, they were wanting the owners, they wanted to include the slaves to be counted for representation. But then the North, they said, wait, you know what? Then they should be allowed to vote, right? So we're starting to see the conflict between the North and the South here. Okay.